Through the ashes sparks, the hills above the town were blackened, skeletal reminders of a summer fire that had raged without mercy. Once green olive groves now stood as charred silhouettes against a pale sky. Ash still clung to the air, drifting across narrow cobblestone streets like snow that refused to melt. The scent of smoke had seeped into everything, into stone, into fabric, into memory. Elena walked slowly through what was left of her childhood home. The fire had eaten it in a single night. The roof was gone, the windows hollow. Walls stood crooked, scorched, as if exhausted by the effort of simply remaining upright. She bent down, brushing aside gray dust until her fingers touched something solid. A small ceramic bird she had once sculpted with her mother. Its wings were chipped, the glaze cracked, but it was intact. She cradled it against her chest, whispering, "You survived." The town square, once buzzing with life, was quiet now except for the sounds of hammers and shovels. Volunteers had come from neighboring cities to help rebuild. Relief tents lined the plaza. Children played among the ruins, their laughter strained but real, stubborn against despair. Elena didn't belong to the laughter. Grief weighed too heavy. Since the fire, she had spoken little, painting nothing. Her hands, once so sure with brush and canvas, felt foreign, empty. "Miss, do you need help with that?" A voice asked. She turned. A man stood nearby, wearing the yellow jacket of the regional fire brigade, though the jacket looked worn, almost tired. His dark hair curled damply against his forehead, and his face bore the faint soot stains that seemed impossible to wash away completely. He carried a box of supplies, but his eyes were what struck her, gray, steady, like stone cliffs after a storm. "I don't need help," Elena replied quickly, clutching the broken bird tighter. The man nodded, as if expecting her resistance. "I wasn't sure. People sometimes lift more than they should in places like this." He started to walk away, then paused. "I'm Gabriel." "Elena," she said, though reluctantly, as if her name cost her something. "Good to meet you, Elena," he replied gently, then moved toward another house where volunteers were stacking bricks. She exhaled slowly, anger rising where sorrow had been. Firefighters, they were supposed to protect, to stop the flames. Yet the blaze had swept through her street, unchecked, consuming everything her family had built. In her heart, blame had found a home, and it was easier to direct it outward than to face the emptiness inside. That night, Elena sat by the ruined fountain in the square. Lanterns flickered from the relief tents, casting shifting shadows across walls that still bore scars of smoke. Children's laughter had faded into quiet, leaving only the hum of cicadas. She noticed Gabriel again. He sat alone near the edge of the square, helmet at his side, his shoulders bent forward as if carrying weight invisible to others. He stared at the ground, lost in thought, until someone called him to help unload more crates, for reasons she didn't understand. Elena's gaze lingered on him long after he had gone. The next morning, she returned to her house with a bag to collect whatever fragments of her past remained. As she sifted through the wreckage, she heard footsteps behind her. "You shouldn't be here alone," Gabriel said quietly. Elena straightened, irritation flashing. "This is my home. I can be here if I want." "I know," he said, "but the structure isn't stable. One strong wind, and those beams could collapse." "I'll take my chances." Gabriel hesitated, then stepped closer, scanning the charred walls. "I remember this street," he murmured. "The night of the fire." Her voice cut sharp. Don't tell me how you remember it. You weren't here when it mattered." He met her eyes, and there was no defensiveness, only weariness. "I was on the ridge," he said quietly, trying to hold the line. The wind shifted. We lost control. I couldn't get here in time. Something in his tone, raw, unguarded, silenced her anger for a moment. She looked away, clutching the ceramic bird in her hands. Gabriel's gaze fell on it. That's beautiful. Did you make it? With my mother, Elena said, softer now. She'd be glad you saved it. The words were simple, but they pierced through her walls. She swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting in her eyes. Gabriel stepped back, giving her space. I'll be nearby if you need help, he said, and left without waiting for thanks. Elena remained still, her breath uneven. Something inside her shifted, just slightly, like the faintest breeze stirring ashes. Days passed. The town began to breathe again. Volunteers cleared debris, rebuilt walls, shared meals under tarps. Slowly, the square filled with voices. Life pushed stubbornly through the blackened earth. Elena found herself crossing paths with Gabriel more often than she expected. Sometimes he worked with the team hauling bricks. Other times, he brought food to the elderly. Always quiet, always steady. One afternoon, she watched him kneel to help a boy patch a scraped knee. His large, soot-stained hands were surprisingly gentle as he tied a bandage, speaking softly to calm the child. Elena turned away quickly, unsettled. She didn't want to see kindness in him. She didn't want her grief to loosen its grip. Yet something about Gabriel lingered in her thoughts, no matter how she tried to push it away. That evening, as twilight deepened over the town, Elena walked to the hillside. From there she could see the charred forest stretching for miles, black against the fading sky. Once it had been her refuge, her muse for painting. Now it was silent, dead. You still come here, Gabriel's voice said behind her. She startled, then sighed. I didn't hear you. Old habit, he said. Firefighters learn to move quietly. He stopped a few steps away, respecting distance. Together they stood in silence, gazing at the burned hills. Do you ever wonder if it will grow back? Elena asked finally. Gabriel looked at the horizon. It will. Slowly. New shoots will push through. The land always remembers how to heal. And people? She asked, her voice trembling. He turned toward her, eyes steady. People too. For the first time since the fire, Elena felt warmth beneath the ashes of her heart. Small, fragile, but real. Embers the days blended into one another, measured not by calendars, but by the slow rhythm of rebuilding. Each morning, the square filled with voices and the scrape of shovels, the clang of hammers. The fire had stolen so much, but it had also left behind a kind of unity, strangers working side by side, grief binding them as tightly as hope. Elena had not intended to join the volunteers. At first, she came only to wander the ruins of her home, to sit with memories no one else could see. But something shifted when she saw an elderly neighbor struggling to carry wood for a temporary shelter. Without thinking, Elena took one end of the bundle. After that, she kept coming back. Not for herself, she told anyone who asked, but for the others. Still, she noticed her own grief softening at the edges as she carried bricks, distributed bread, or comforted frightened children. Helping others dulled the ache of her own loss, if only for a while. Gabriel was everywhere. Always working, always quiet. He lifted heavy beams with other men, cleared roads with the rescue team, repaired broken roofs. Yet despite his constant motion, he seemed apart from the rest, as if carrying a weight invisible to those around him. Elena tried to avoid him, but fate, or something like it, kept weaving their paths together. One afternoon, she was painting again for the first time since the fire. Not on canvas. She had none, but with pieces of charcoal from the ruins, sketching on the back of cardboard salvaged from supply boxes. Her lines were clumsy, her hand unsteady, but the act of creating felt like breathing after too long underwater. May I see? She turned to find Gabriel standing behind her, helmet under his arm, soot smeared across his cheek. It's nothing, she said quickly, shielding the sketch. He didn't press, only lowered himself to sit on a broken wall a few feet away. I used to draw when I was younger, he said, mostly maps and ships. My father was a fisherman. I thought I'd follow him to the sea. Elena hesitated, curiosity nudging past her defenses. And instead, you fight fires. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Instead, I fight things I can't always win against. Silence stretched between them. Then Elena, surprising herself, asked, Do you ever regret it? His eyes remained on the horizon. Every day? And yet no, because even when we lose, sometimes we save someone. That has to be enough. Elena studied him, searching for insincerity, but found only raw honesty. She realized then that his silence wasn't indifference. It was a shield against the weight of memory. Much like her OWNAS, the weeks passed. Small moments began to knit them closer when Elena sliced her hand on broken glass. Gabriel was the one who wrapped the bandage, his touch careful, his brow furrowed in concentration. When Gabriel collapsed from exhaustion after 3 days without rest, Elena was the one who brought him water and forced him to sit beneath the shade of a tarp when laughter returned to the square in hesitant bursts. They sometimes found themselves smiling at the same small absurdities. Children chasing each other through piles of bricks. Goats wandering into relief tents. Neither of them spoke of it, but a quiet rhythm developed between them, like coals glowing under ash. Unseen but alive. One evening, a storm rolled in from the sea, washing the hills with heavy rain. The villagers gathered in the square, huddled beneath makeshift shelters. Gabriel worked through the downpour, checking the drainage channels to make sure the new shelters wouldn't flood. Elena, restless, followed him. You'll catch a fever, she called over the rain as he glanced at her, rain dripping from his hair. And leave everyone else to drown? You don't have to do everything alone, she said, stepping closer. For the first time, he smiled. Not the fleeting, polite smile he offered strangers, but something real, weary and warm. Neither do you. They stood together in the storm until the rain eased, the smell of wet ash rising from the ground. Later, Elena found herself walking toward the ridge where the fire had first broken through. The land was desolate, stripped bare. Yet here and there, tiny green shoots pierced the soil, fragile but insistent. She crouched, running her fingers across one sprout. The earth remembers how to heal, Gabriel had said. And maybe he was right. When she returned to the village, she saw him waiting near the fountain. No words were needed. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, a promise. The embers of something new glowed quietly, waiting for breath to become flame. Flame summer drifted toward autumn, and with it came a slow transformation. The town no longer smelled entirely of smoke. Fresh wood, damp earth, and baking bread mingled with the memory of ash. Rebuilding was far from finished, but there was movement, progress. Elena painted again, with canvas and paints donated by volunteers. She set up her easel near the edge of the square, sketching not what had been lost, but what was returning. The bright fabric of relief tints, the resilience in faces, the way light broke through the gaps of ruined roofs. Gabriel stopped by often, never lingering long, but always watching quietly. She could feel his gaze, steady and grounding, like the weight of the earth beneath her feet. One evening, he approached her with a rare spark in his eyes. Come with me tomorrow, he said. Where? You'll see. The next morning, They walked beyond the edge of the burned hills. The landscape was bleak, charred trunks jutting like broken teeth. But as they descended into a narrow valley, the air shifted. Shade fell across their path, cool and unexpected. Elena gasped. Before them stretched a grove untouched by flame. Olive trees stood green and heavy with fruit, their silver leaves rustling in the breeze. Wildflowers painted the ground in yellow and purple. A small stream trickled, its water clear, reflecting the sunlight. How? She whispered. The fire split around this place, Gabriel said. No one knows why. Maybe the wind. Maybe chance. Maybe something greater. Elena stepped forward, her hands trembling. For the first time since the fire, she smelled earth unscarred, life unbroken. Tears blurred her vision as she touched the rough bark of an olive tree. This, she whispered, is what hope looks like. Gabriel watched her, his face softer than she had ever seen. I wanted you to see it, to remember that not everything was lost. Their eyes met, and something shifted, no longer just gratitude, but something deeper, burning quietly between them. The grove became their refuge. When the weight of rebuilding grew heavy, they returned there. Elena painted beneath the trees, her colors vivid again. Gabriel sometimes sat beside her in silence. Sometimes told stories of his childhood by the SEA.IT was there, one golden afternoon, that Gabriel finally spoke what had been building in silence. Elena, he said, his voice low, I carry guilt every day. For the lives I couldn't save, for the homes I couldn't protect. But when I'm here with you, it feels lighter. She lowered her brush, meeting his gaze. I blamed you once, she admitted. I thought if I hated you, it would hurt less. But you've given more to this town than anyone. And you've given me something I thought I'd never find again. What's that? He asked. She reached for his hand, her touch gentle yet firm. A reason to hope. His fingers tightened around hers. And in the quiet grove, with sunlight spilling through the leaves, they kissed, soft at first, then deeper, carrying the weight of loss and the spark of something reborn for the first time since the fire. Elena felt alive. Asterisk through the ashes, but healing was never a straight line. The winds grew hot again as summer's end brought another dry spell. Rumors spread of flames rekindling in the hills. The villagers grew restless, fear lurking in their voices whenever smoke appeared on the horizon. One night, the alarm bell rang. Shouts filled the square. A new fire had broken out beyond the ridge, fierce and fast. Gabriel was already moving, gathering his gear. Elena caught his arm. Don't go alone. I have to, he said. The wind is strong. If it jumps the ridge, the town is finished. Then I'm coming, she insisted. He shook his head. It's too dangerous. I won't let fear take you from me. For a moment, they stared at each other, the world collapsing into that single choice. Finally, Gabriel nodded. Stay close. Do as I say. Together, they climbed toward the ridge. The fire glowed ahead, a red horizon against the night sky. Ash swirled around them, hot and choking. The roar of flames was like an animal, alive and hungry. They joined a line of firefighters beating back sparks, clearing brush, digging trenches. Elena worked beside Gabriel, her arms aching, her lungs burning, but she refused to stop. Then a gust of wind changed everything. The flames leapt forward, devouring dry grass, racing toward a cluster of houses. Panic surged through the team. Go! Gabriel shouted, grabbing Elena's hand. They ran, dodging falling branches and embers. Heat seared their skin. The night became a storm of fire at the edge of the grove. They found themselves surrounded. Flames closed in on three sides, smoke thick and suffocating. Elena coughed, clutching her chest. Gabriel tore off his jacket, wrapping it around her. Stay down. Breathe through this. What about you? She cried. I'll get us out. He forced a path through the flames, shielding her with his body. Sparks burned his arms, smoke filled his lungs, but he pushed forward, step by agonizing step. At last, they stumbled into a clearing where the fire had not yet reached. Elena fell to her knees, tears streaming. Gabriel collapsed beside her, coughing violently. His skin was burned, his breathing ragged. You saved me, she whispered, holding his face in her hands. His eyes, weary but alive, met hers. No, Elena, you saved me. You gave me something worth living for. She kissed him through tears and soot, the world burning around them. But in that moment, they were unbreakable. Together, they endured until dawn. When the fire was finally beaten back, epilogue, dawn weeks later, the town gathered for a lantern festival to honor what had been lost and what had endured. Lanterns rose into the night sky, drifting like glowing prayers above the ruins. Elena stood beside Gabriel, his hand warm in hers despite the bandages still wrapped around his arms. The scars would remain, but so would the strength they had found together. As the lanterns rose higher, Elena whispered, through the ashes, we found life again. Gabriel looked at her, eyes shining in the golden light. Through the ashes, we found love. And hand in hand, they watched the sky fill with light, knowing that even from devastation, beauty could rise.